Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. My guest today is Olaf Hermans, and as our conversation unfolded, it kept going and kept going. And so I realized that in the middle of this, that what we need to do is turn this into two episodes. So this will be episode one of two, and the next one will come at the next edition of the Eddie Network podcast. So that's just to let you know that there'll be two episodes with Olaf Hermans, and I think you'll find it quite interesting, particularly if you're in a position of leadership in an organization. I think what we talk about and what you will hear from Olaf is very, very valuable and worthwhile. So thank you and enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. My guest today is Olaf Hermans, a friend of mine from a while back who's been on the show before. And we think very differently, and yet we're very similar in the way we approach things. That's accurate, isn't it, Olaf?
Yeah, definitely. And it's wonderful that we can call each other friends, even though this is the second time we speak in person. And all the rest of this friendship is established through critical, mutual, constructive comments
Well, let's
online.
talk about that because I think that's almost the foundation for all the other things that we do in our lives, which is we find some people that we identify with in some manner, and then we go off on our individual journeys of discovery, but we're sharing that all along at the same time, and we're finding, oh, that was interesting. Oh, that was an interesting conversation. And that's really what the Eddie Network is that kind of level of interesting conversation with people who find that they have a lot in common, but have never been together in the same.
That's it, yeah. And friendship is built in an instant. In an instant, there's no conditions. So it's unconditional. So you can call me whenever happens something to you personally. You can call me in the middle of the night, and I will respond. So, and that's
Yeah.
interesting because we always think that this is something, trust. It needs to grow. No. Under the right circumstances, with the right up, it establishes instantly.
So
Uh,
it's this understanding of friendship, which is more than being in the same proximity and having similar interests. But
yeah.
this idea of friendship is it growing in significance in the world? Is it something which is an answer to or an antidote to some other things that are going on?
Oh, I, I, I don't see it that way. I consider my life as a puzzle of pieces, and friendships are part of it, and other things. But I don't need anything to compensate for something else. So everything is worthwhile in its own right, and friendships are great. And what is remarkable is that they establish equally easily for me with people with whom I'm alike, and with people whom I don't, or I share even opposite viewpoints with. So, I was raised from a young child with the idea that people who think differently from you, stay close to these people. Not because they are your enemies or you should compete with them, but you can learn something from them. So,
Who taught
it's
you that? Who taught you that?
oh yeah, that is like my mother and father. I come from. From a curious family, and we believe that there was always more out there, and there's more interesting out there, and so we never had this kind of complacency with. I mean, we are like grateful and satisfied with what we have, but there's always this quest for, you know, keep looking, keep asking questions, and yeah. So friendships established in that process. Yeah.
How many generations going back was that something that is a part of your family? Is that
Yeah, it
generations
goes back.
back?
Yes, it goes back generations. And interestingly, I come from a family where money has never played a role. And if it played a role, it was like, that we had to work. work for it to have some of it. But despite that reality, we never compromised on exploring and losing time. Spending time with people where you didn't see what the eventual gain could be, or so just spending time for the sake of spending time with people. And so then, of course, you don't make much money because you're wasting time with shiploads. And but I now, of course, where you are, I don't feel that I wasted much of my time.
Oh, I agree with you because you learn something from every person you meet.
Yeah, that's your slogan. That's it. As you always said, like, look, invite famous people. So like, no. You always give this example in the bar where you say like, any one of these people here around is worthwhile interviewing, and I'm completely with you on that. Yeah.
I'm amazed at what I've discovered through the podcast, and it's not just the people who have been guests on the podcast; it's the people who have watched and have said something to me about it. And I don't know what to make of it. I mean, it's
It's a unique artwork, so, and it's yours. Nobody else has done it. It's yours, and at Brenniger Show, it defines hopefully a bit of you, and you can be proud of it. It's fantastic, and it's an honor to be there. And now that you go like full circle again and go back to people, I think it makes it even more worthwhile. And I think a little while you also intended to start doing more with groups of people, rather than just individuals, like more community thing. And I saw how you started to talk more to people from the arts, rather than just from maybe what would be the traditional leadership wing of thinking. And that is also very interesting. And the
well,
arts bring us so much. Yeah.
what I found, Olaf, is that most of these podcasts have a theme to them or a topic, and it
Mm.
attracts the people who are interested in that topic. And I didn't want to do that because I'm interested in everything. But even more importantly, I felt that there were things going on in the world that other people didn't know about that they should know about. And you kind of already described that. Okay, we're going to meet some people. We some people would say, well, this is a waste of time, but it's not really a waste of time. We've learned something from it. So it was
Mm.
like back in the spring or late winter, the notion of starting a playlist of poets came to me. I had gone to an event where there were poets that spoke, and there were essayists that spoke, and I thought, if I could interview some of these guys and women, men and women, then I could start a playlist, and all of a sudden, the world that is looking at the Eddie Network podcast, who's not looking at it, maybe looking at it for leadership, are discovering that poets have something to say to us. Boing. Well,
Not mine.
I am next week. I'm interviewing Jennifer Davison, who I interviewed before, who
Mm.
is an American living in Vienna, who is an opera singer, and I've placed before her the thought: why don't we create? Why don't you introduce me to people in the world of opera that you can let me interview, and we create an opera playlist
Mm. Mm.
because that's another aspect of the arts that people know very little about. And I
Mm.
don't
Mm.
understand it. I mean, I appreciate it, but I don't understand it. But but what I'm suggesting is that there's something that has constricted us from being able to meet people who are not like us.
Yes. Yes. And when it comes to people in the arts, what also surprised me when I listened to some of the interviews you had with them is, we always think that these are the people like are expressive and creative people, and so on, which is true, of course. But on top of that, you find immense structure and immense depth of knowledge in these people about art before them, about other strands of work, and also in their thinking. I mean, when you think about music, that's all. There's a lot of mathematics in there. There's so much structure, so much cognition. So and it's not just the emotional, qualitative, affective, the interconnected, and so on. It's also structure,
Yeah.
pace, rhythm, and these people master. The best artists master that game, and whether it's in words or anything as well. So because I'm same, I'm a structure guy, I'm a numbers guy. I'm not a technology person, but I'm in the technologies, and technologies is way more than technology. Technology, we think of software and hardware and so, but I mean technologies like methods, scalable methods. How can we structure good conversation? What should a good conversation of 15 minutes look like? What is a good coffee machine conversation? And what is not? See, and what is good art? And what is bad art? So yeah, and it's fascinating. So
So where do we begin with that? I mean, you meet someone at the coffee machine. Where do we begin? What from your experience? Where do you begin when you meet someone for the first time? What do you have a do you have a plan? Do you
Yeah,
have
the opening is still, yeah, it's always hard. Indeed, every day you're a different person, so what's your opening. um, but I'm still in relational cognition, relational metacognition. It's my field, and I'm proud of that. It's a field that I help to define, interestingly, without ever publishing on it scientifically. I actually left academia in 2016. I finished my PhD in 2018, and it was all about relationship cognition. That is like how people represent the relationships in their mind, whether you have a good or a bad relationship, what type of relationship you think you're having with someone, and like what is the image of relationships that we hold in our minds, and how does that influence the behaviors inside those relationships. So that was my PhD, was about that. And not just the relationship between people, but also the relationship between people and the bigger whole. So it's interesting when your relationship partner is an abstract entity, the whole, more specifically, the whole that moves forward. So what do you have with a whole that is moving forward? That is like a double abstraction. And it's a fascinating question. It's the most fascinating question, and that's also where we come very close to each other, because that is what leadership is about. Leadership is about moving the whole forward with everybody. So in the eyes of everybody, not just like in its own terms as a leader, but in the eyes of everybody, whether it's clients or employees or partners or stakeholders or citizens, either way. So that's where I'm always interested that when we talk about leadership and organizations and things, that we have to lead, that I don't come from a systemic thinking background. I come from a cognition background, the ability of people to position themselves in a whole here, in their minds, and then from there plan their collaborations, their interventions, their excellence, their thriving, like where can I make a difference? What you call impact, lead for impact. Yeah, okay, but lead for impact, then you need to see somewhere, find a hole in the hole where you can find where a gap that you can jump into. So yeah, that is a magnificent field of study. From there, there's a few things that I'm proud of, that I kind of redefined for myself. I mean, officially in human literature, in the mainstream psychology literature, we're not there yet, but I redefined motivation. And I think we discussed that last time. For me, highest motivation is not intrinsic motivation, or it is not a combination of connectedness and competence and autonomy and so on. And the highest motivation is the energy, in my eyes, that stems from the encounter between craftsmanship, ownership, and parenthood. But already that sentence, that comes for many people, that comes from the left field. That is like, what do you mean motivation, energy, encounter, and then free abstract concepts and so on? But when you think about the definition, everybody will agree with me that is the highest form of motivation that you will ever find. Either you're part of that triangle that meets, or you're observing those three having their encounter, and you think like, wow, I need to stay close to those three. But motivation theory does not know what
it
you're
it
talking about. It does not exist.
it sounds like, and I'm just adding more words to this, but it sounds like the challenge for each one of us is to identify the specific context we're in, and that specific context is the whole. It may be
It's a
the
whole.
whole whole, but it's a whole, and that
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
it has boundaries, it has structure, it has outcomes. I mean, has a network for relating to one another and relating to things. I mean, it's all those things are happening all within this. I'm just going to call it a ball
Yeah.
of
It's a ball. It's a sphere. It's a sphere. Yeah.
sphere.
And a nice concept, always what I call it to grasp it or capture it a little easier, is the whole plus one. Because your whole is what you see. But it's always interesting then when someone tells you that there is a whole, yours, and then the next little bigger thing than your whole. And then he tells you that you can contribute to that whole plus one. And then people say like, "Oh, can I?" And see, that it's basically like the next layer of your whole, because the whole is very big, but the whole plus one is interesting. And yeah,
The image that I have is that of soap bubbles, and you are
yeah, yeah.
a soap bubble, and you encounter another, and the two bubbles come together, and it's larger.
Yes, yes, yes. And always my when you go to back to artists, and my favorite artist, whose work, and I've never met him, but although he lives only like a few hundred miles away from me, is Theo Jansen with the Strand Beast. And my image is the Strand Beast. I mean, you look it up on YouTube when you hear this, the Strand Beast by Theo Jansen. And that man has dedicated his life to make animals that are kind of have are propulsion by the wind, and he puts them on the beach, and they're nothing more than a bunch of sticks. But actually, during his lifetime as an artist, he is reliving the entire biological evolution of Darwin, because he started with a small strand beast, and now he has evolutions, what he calls evolutions, like how fish went ashore and became something else. And now we are like 35 years later, 40 years later, and his strand beasts start to fly. So he has now strand beasts that fly. And once you see that these are engineered, but you cannot stop yourself from believing that they are alive. But everybody from the whole world, people are sending letters to Theo Jansen and say like, look, if you do this mechanically slightly different, then this thing will run faster and will fly faster. So the whole world is collaborating to make his strand beast better. So there is the beast, there's the artist, and there's people looking at the artist, telling the artist like, you can do better. See, there's like meta layers of, how we can together make this thing fly. And the whole is the beast, but actually the whole is the beast plus the artist plus us, plus the better version of the beast that we envision. So a whole. But all these layers are very tangible and very concrete in our minds.
Well, it sounds just like how mankind has developed over the millennia.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And he does an artist. Yeah. I always like a beautiful story, also with beaches, by the way. And I told it to someone this week. My elderly brother is an engineer. I'm not. I'm just a psychologist. And he makes locks for ships, like in the Panama Canal, and so he's in engineering, like the big engineering works. And the real engineers, like how can we keep the sea away from the land? We as the Dutch know everything about that, because 80% of our country is under sea level. If we would not stop the sea, then we would be inundated. So, we love water engineering, and my brother is one like that. But at age of 8, my brother was sitting at the beach. So we went on a beach holiday with the family, and every kid builds a castle, with 2 buckets, and then, you build a castle. But he said, like, no, I'm going to build a castle that will withstand the tide when it will come in at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and my castle will prevail. It will, it doesn't. We don't want this like artistic, like your little castle. We want a real castle. So what happened is that he was there every morning on the beach, and more kids who were there for a week started to abandon their own projects and started to contribute to his castle. And he was like a commander in chief, like telling, like, look, you do that tower, and he was kind of, and he never ever intended to be a commander. He was just making his castle, but ever more volunteers said, like, look, yeah, we also want to make a castle, but ours will never stand to sea. So, withstand the sea. So, can we help? And so the whole beach, all the children, and it was almost like a safe place for parents to leave their children, because that by 7 hours later they would still be contributing to digging like 3 layers of protection to protect the core castle where the prince and the princess lived, and so on. And yeah, there it was. See, so it okay, and eventually, the tide came in, and everybody was there and standing and witnessing and filming and so on. And of course, it did not withstand the tide, huh? But it did in our minds.
But it was the experience of doing this together,
Invincible. We're invincible.
which means, well, we done it once. We can do this again, and next time we can do it better.
And tomorrow morning, reporting for duty 1 hour earlier. So all the kids were at the beach 1 hour earlier, because we can make today a better one than yesterday. And it was all gone, like, and so. But these kind of stories are fantastic, like leadership.
It's sort of like the old mantra of fail faster again. So you actually learn what is actually needed.
Yeah. And reporting for duty, yeah, there is discipline, and and wanting to know, the technical aspects of things. Why not just let's be unique and creative, but no, let's be technically perfect. We can do it.
But everybody had a stake in the outcome.
And stake in the outcome. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
that's why it mattered to every one of those kids that participated, because this is
Yeah,
our project. It's not your
yeah.
brother. It's our project.
It's our project, yeah. And flags were brought into it, and you put flags on the moon. We had flags on the castle and so on. And yeah, but okay, just to tell you, like, and this is the spirit in which I was raised. Make bigger constructions that stand the test of time. And yeah, and mine, of course, is my dream at my age. I'm 59, and every morning I do. I'm not really religious, but I pray that I get one day longer to make the next strand beast. But my strand beast, of course, is how can you have simultaneous individual conversations with 100,000 or 10 billion people at the same time about how the whole is progressing, whether the whole is progressing well, so about our shared future together. And so how can we have conversations about the future and do so in a safe, constructive, and structured way? And that is like a mass of conversations. Everybody is part of it. Everybody can have such a conversation with each other, or with a central authority, or whatever. But we're also all wanting to look at, Olaf, what does this animal of all these conversations, what does the orchestration and the engine look like? So everybody wants to be part of course, the conversation, like how we're going to move the whole forward. But we also want to know, can we contribute to making the engine of that conversation? So we all want to be active at the meta level as well. So exactly with the Strand Beast, we want to be part of the Strand Beast. We want to be in it. We want to feel what it is to be part of an engine that is driven by, not by wind, but in my case, by goodwill or loyalty. So loyalty is the currency, or goodwill is the currency, is the loyalty. That is like the force that drives this thing forward. But we also everybody wants to be at the end of the artist, and Olaf asked me, like, Olaf, how are you? How is it going? Is the engine improving? And and how do you cluster people? Who do you bring together for what type of conversation? And when is what are the criterion for conversations to be safe? Like how do you protect people to not be scapegoated, to be labeled as a whistleblower or a witch hunt when they say something about the future which may be dissident from what other people are saying, or deviant from what other people are saying, and so on. So it is like a game, it's to organize mass conversation like Monopoly. I mean, there's rules and rules of engagement and so on. And I'm now like 15 years into designing that game and improving it, just like Theo Jansen is improving his, or making the next evolution of his Trend Beast. Yeah.
Do you feel that what you have identified um, has been missing in the way organizations, institutions, society has been organized over the past many generations.
Yes, 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 definitely. And yeah, it's always interesting, and you say it always. We have not prepared this conversation, so we just went into it blank. And
Right.
but now we go to the topic of intelligence. So the interesting thing is that what is intelligent? And yeah, the people in California have already defined it for us, artificial intelligence, and then now AGI is coming up, and so on and so on. But I think that they have not listened to a particular group, who has a complete different definition of what intelligence is. I mean, um, I think that the intelligence that people want and that they can identify with is not artificial intelligence. I mean, that is something that maybe they can use at best, but I'm afraid of it in the sense that social media promised us all kinds of good things, and yes, it brought some good things, but it also brought many more bad things in exponentially augmented way. And I see this. I think that I fear the same with AI because it's built on the same premises. But what is the intelligence that people can identify with? Well, let's go back to my brother or to the strand beast. These are complete safe places. An engineer who's just making his thing, who's following laws, and just is heuristic in his approach, like old-fashioned rule-based. Is perfectly predictable. Everybody can find his place. It's all there is absolute certainty. That we can do so much work by 5 p.m. tonight when the sea will come and so on. And so the intelligence that we can identify with as people, and which is very much alive, is not an analytical intelligence, it's a structural intelligence. And structural intelligence is just mechanical. It's kind of the strand beast or the castle. These are all comprehensive systems, but they're kind of clunky. So it's kind of clunky because we are limited with the tools that we have, and we try to, it's kind of bricolage. So we try to put together what we can, but it moves. It moves, and tomorrow we make better progress than yesterday, so and so on. But this is the intelligence that captures us. That is like a quantum attractor. Quantum attractor. And so we are attracted to an intelligence that is not too intelligent.
So it sounds to me that you're saying this structural intelligence
Yeah.
has a mediating purpose to it, and it's mediating abstract intelligence with what I would call intuitive intelligence or tacit knowledge. The things that we know that we do not know why we know, but we know them because we have learned them by just how we have lived. I mean,
Yeah.
we learn not to jump off buildings because we've seen someone jump off a building and get hurt. So that's tacit knowledge. We don't need abstract knowledge to teach us what tacit knowledge is. But somehow just having knowledge in those two kind of resource banks, let's call it resource banks,
Mhm.
needs something in the middle to bring it together to utilize, make it function in a way that serves the whole.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an intelligence that comes to you and that appears to be pretty smart. It knows what it's doing. So I've studied long in psychology and conversation, and I know a few things about it, enough to be um, interesting enough to make some hypotheses and to propose certain things and so on. I don't say that I know everything. That's what I say, like my brother when he built his sandcastle, and same with Theo Jansen. I mean, he's just putting some stuff together, but does so. But what I also said about the artist, based on a rigorous study of what was possible, without having the pretense that we know everything. But then that intelligence tells to you, Mr. Nobody or anybody, like, hey, why don't you report for duty tomorrow and you can be part of this? I give you a place in this. And I think that with you, this thing will fly better, and I'm absolutely sure that this thing with your effort will fly better than it flies today. But that is an intelligence proposition. I mean, so we have someone in front of you who is intelligent, but still intelligent enough to include you in its intelligence. Yeah, but now you can say AI does the same. Yeah, but it already read everything about us before it started to talk to us. It had 9 years to prepare and to scan, to browse the internet and read everything, and without anybody knowing like what exactly it was that it read and learned. That is not the same. That is not the same as something that comes to you in blank sheet and says like, look, I don't know anything about you, but I still think that you can be of added value to what I'm making, and what I'm making is smart, and it serves a purpose, and it will attract many big people. But it's clear what intelligence people will choose and will prefer to be part of, and actually to use and to learn from. So it's the co-intelligence. And you say, yeah, but all that is in AI. No, yeah, no, it's not. Yeah, I know. It sounds that they are doing that, but the operationalization of it is not safe.
Well, no one talks about the limitations of AI. They think it's wide open and um, it's totally whatever it is for the open. It's open. I think it can only work off of what it has.
Yeah, it is. That's it. Yeah.
And I know,
Well,
I know for myself
Mhm.
that there are things that I learn on a daily basis that do not exist anywhere on any database.
That's it. Yeah.
And the question is, what do I do with that knowledge?
Mm,
In some cases, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. In fact, most cases I don't, but I'm storing it in my own mind, and
yeah.
we'll come back to it when something triggers that remembrance. So I think that intelligence is memory. It's memory,
Yes. Recall.
artificial
Yeah.
memory, but it's also
Mhm.
human memory. I mean, you spoke about how your family has kind of prepared you to be the way you are.
Mhm.
But that's because there's generational memory in your family which is respected and valued. And I don't know how many generations you go back, but there are probably stories that are told about great grandma that has a defining effect upon what I'm going to do this afternoon.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. We were raised with the idea that we deserve better. So I mean that is like the statement. Wherever we are, we always believe that we deserve better, and that is not saying that what is there is not good enough. See, so that these are two different things. And so we're going to be very grateful, very satisfied with what is there, but I think we deserve better,
but
and I think we can do better. So well, there we are.
it's like my grandmother. I mean, I've said this so many times. But it's the thing which defines the way I've lived my life. She said, I was 12 years old. She said, "You may do anything you want, but do not bring shame to the family name."
Yeah, yeah,
And so that means I can go do anything I want within the boundaries of what is respectful
yeah.
and trustworthy. And if you live your life that way, then you're going to find yourself in the midst of people that if you tried to do it some other way, you would never have the opportunity to meet them.
No,
Now,
no,
if
no.
you were to translate that into how a business operates, then a business could do anything it wants as long as it respects its past. That doesn't mean
Yeah,
it follows its past, but it respects its past. And that's what I find is quite interesting is that um, having I spent 20 years as a consultant, organizational consultant, and I worked with companies and organizations and all kinds of different types of organizations. And what I found was one is that they didn't know what their past was. Two, when they did know it, it oftentimes was much more of uh, a weight of a weight on them that they felt like they couldn't do
Yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah, kind of, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so they were constantly in kind of an alienated state as to, well, who are we? And okay,
Mm,
we know we're building widgets.
mm, mm,
But why are we building these widgets? Why are we doing what we're doing? And that history, that generational memory in those businesses, what I found was if you went and found the employees who had been there for 20, 30, 40 years, they had that memory. And if you listen to them, all of a sudden you recognize, oh, so this is the history of this company. And why aren't they living that out?
yeah, recall is so important. Yeah, that's it. Like, yeah, we should forget. Only look forward. Only look forward. No, no, recall is important. Mm.
Yeah. It is a fascinating period of time we're living in because I don't think that whatever we think is happening
Mm,
is actually happening. I think
mm.
some other things are going on that people do not have the tools to see. When you talk about seeing the whole, I don't think people know how to see the whole.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's why you needed technology. So you don't see it, and that's why something needs to inform you about the relational positions of others and the wholes of others. Yeah,
But
that's it. Yeah.
I don't even think that they have a mental conception that the whole exists.
No, no, no. But that's interesting. But that is something like that. You come back to the question of your two guests last week. I mean, that is very easy to cue or to kind of signal to people. Huh?
Yeah.
That is like you just go to people, and that is where the for me in my work the key concept is environment success ownership. And when that knocks on your shoulder, then you know that the bigger whole exists. That is real. Like when someone that's always the drunk uncle. Remember we spoke about it I think last time at the party. Like when someone knocks on your shoulder and say like welcome at the party. I'm the parent or the father of the bride. Okay, then you know I'm just at a party but for that person this party is something bigger. And when he says like look I'm very happy that you're here because you're contributing to something that is like important to us and so on, and you just thought that you came for drinks and food. See, so suddenly when environment success ownership knocks on your shoulder, then suddenly you know that your whole is yeah, smaller than that person's whole.
And what you just said is true for every person that you meet.
Yeah,
Their
that's it.
whole, the whole of their life is bigger than your whole as it interacts with theirs.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. And that's for me why in my world inverse empathy is so important. Inverse empathy. I'm the founder of that, and I still am in love with that concept. I have so
Describe
many
what
new
that is.
concepts.
Describe what that is. What is
Well,
inverse?
inverse empathy is always like when someone comes to you and says like, look, for instance, my brother, and the kid says, um, a kid comes up to him and says like, look, I have a problem. I'm trying to build a castle. Can you spare me a bucket or some good advice on how to do it? And then my brother tells him like, hold that thought. Why don't you come over? Because I have a bigger problem. I need to finish this castle by 5 p.m. tonight, and it's a bigger one than yours. And that's my problem. So you with your little castle problem and so on. Listen to my problem, and why don't you come and help solve my bigger problem? Huh? And then we will see how you can either integrate your little castle in mine, inverse empathy. So, in no time, someone sees how small and maybe redundant, or at least for the moment, his or her problem is in the context of someone who's dealing with a bigger problem, and instantly sees like, oh, I have an interest in first contributing to solving the bigger problem that person has, and then my problem will not be resolved but dissolve. It will dissolve because maybe I don't want to make a castle. See, so the dissolution of problems is so interesting. So not the resolution of problems. And so empathy is always like a problem. I understand, yeah, but yeah, okay, now listen to my problem, and it's way bigger than yours, but we can maybe integrate yours in mine.
So I think what you just said
Yeah,
is that we have a choice whether we want to solve the problems that confront us.
yeah,
And if we choose not to, then something happens as a result. Something will always happen. Whether you
solid.
choose to solve the problem or choose not to solve the problem, something is going to happen. And the question is, what is it that you want to have happen?
Yeah, but we know from science that 90% of the people, of the kids, at the end of the day, are sitting in the big castle,
Yeah.
the bigger castle than theirs. And so, if we are empathetic with everybody, then we would have like on 100 kids, we would have like 90 small castles on the beach. But now we have one big castle that was made by 90 kids, and so inverse empathy. Yeah, we understand your problem, but we're not going to solve it. It will dissolve itself because you don't want what you think you want, and the problem you have actually is not your problem. But that's so powerful. The
There,
whole theory of control flips. So the whole theory of control flips. We are taught that focus on what you can control. You can only be responsible for what you can control. So that's my little castle. No, 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 of course not. With all of us together, our control stretches beyond boundaries. And actually, what I can control is my own life. Well, I don't know, because the children who are participating tomorrow will be different kids. And so they let go of their what they thought they could control, is their little world. They let go of that, and they start to co-control the bigger world, which then eventually makes them a better person without that they ever had any control about being that better person. See, so that is always like, for me, I always say that like identity lies not in the morning when you look in the mirror, it lies at the evening when you look in the mirror, like what the day brought you. So don't do any sessions with people up front and say like, look, I need to know who I am and what I believe before I can start the day. Say like, look, no, get out of bed, get to work with others, and at the end of the day, there will be a campfire, and we will celebrate, and then you can tell me who you are, or how you have become, or how you have changed. But don't come with your identity nonsense up front. Just come in blank sheet with your open mind, and don't worry, you will be someone tonight, but you are nothing in the morning. Yes, a contributor, so here you are. So reporting for duty.
so
But this is, yeah.
we're talking about, therefore, we're talking about scaling inverse empathy so
Yeah,
that the whole becomes larger and everyone has a stake in the
stake in it.
outcome of the whole.
Yeah, because the success of the whole is so easy to clone. I mean, everybody can say that without him or her, it would not have materialized. And that is the beautiful illusion, of course, the illusion and truth. That is like, yeah, but without me, it would not have materialized. Yeah, and that is true and not true, of course. But because if you would have not have done it, we would have done it with other children. But still, it is true. You were there, you sat through it the whole day, you defended your tower, against the sea. That is your part, and without that, the whole would not have been as strong. So yes, please reintroduce environment success ownership, because that's the person who can knock on your shoulder and saying that your problem is not as big as his problem or her problem, which is way more interesting to contribute to. Yeah.
So leadership then, I'm just
Yeah. These are concepts.
logic. I'm following the logic. Leadership
Yeah.
then is not about directing or delegating. Leadership is about inviting people to join in the development of the whole.
Yeah. No, it's not
Come
even
join
inviting.
us. come join us.
It's not even inviting. It's just doing and being a quantum attractor.
But
Make
for
sure
some
that
people,
you're the
they need
person
to
to
be.
go to.
For some people, they have been so socialized against taking personal initiative.
Hmm.
They need to be invited.
Yeah,
And
and importantly, be the trust, not
yeah,
create trust among people. Be the trust. So I really hate leaders who say like, and we need to create trust among people, and and diversity and so on. That's all good. Good. I'm not saying that it's bad, but it's not necessary. And because in the castle, my brother is sitting there. He is the trust because he's the engineer. He knows how to build a castle, or at least and so on. And he delegates that, and he gives everybody his little place, his little, and that's what the artists call, a friend of mine, Chef Teugels, he calls that the grisière. We are not programmed to deal with colors of others. We are only programmed to deal with our own colors. So what we want is a background, a gray background against which we can project and throw our colors. So what we want is we want our little castle, our little contribution in its full flavors in something bigger. And the only guy we needed to trust was the man in the middle who was doing. But we don't have to trust the other 89 children there. See, and yeah, your role is not to create trust, is to make sure that the thing moves forward without trust. And that's what I told the last time as well. And that is still like, these are things you can bury me with those statements, and they are Olaf Hermans statements. That is like, you're not here to create trust, you're here to make the whole progress without trust.
I've told this story so many times, but it's still worth telling because I think it was so definitive of a point period in time. So I was hired to write a value statement for a company, and I had a team, and the team was um, five executives, vice president, senior vice president level, and the four officers of the trade union. Talking about a fun gang to work with. It really was extraordinarily enjoyable because what you're describing was the way it was for this company 20 years before. And and the president of the trade union, when asked, I said, what was it like 20 years ago? He says, we were a family. And and I said, okay. So the new CEO had come in 4 months before. The previous CEO and his team and half of the board had been released because of some ethical problems. But they had operated where they had operated in the opposite manner that you're describing. So no one was really allowed to contribute. They were only allowed to do what they were told to do.
Yeah, that's a problem.
There's a distinction there. And
That's
so
a distinction.
it was clear that this group of people, these 9 people, wanted to be back in a period of time with this company where they would be trusted and could be contributors and feel like they had a stake in this because this company served their local community. So
Hmm.
the new CEO came in and he spent the first 4 months building relationships, getting to know people. And they would call him by his first name, and he would call them by their first names. And he ended up knowing who their spouses were and who their children were, so that when we came to the point of writing this value statement, which we did over a 3 month period of time, um, it was coming to the point where the opportunity was awakening for this company. And
Hmm.
that's what the board wanted. They wanted this company to either grow or be purchased. And so the last day of our project, we came up with we had a choice of 5 different statements that the members of the committee had written. And one of those had more votes than the others. And I said, well, are you ready for the CEO to see this? And they said yes. So went down and got him and brought him back. And we hid the votes and he said, which one do you like? And he chose the one that they had chosen. And the emotion in that room
Mm,
was like nothing I'd ever experienced in a work environment before.
mm,
Well, to say that it was like akin to finding healing, it is not far off the mark because they felt like, oh, we're going to be okay.
we're gonna be okay. Yeah. We're gonna be okay.
And and so they hired a firm who does training to come in and put a training program for the middle managers to train the lower echelon in these leadership principles. And within
Mm,
in 2 years, the company was recognized as one of the 100 most trustworthy companies in the country.
fantastic. Yeah.
So what you're talking about is really possible, and it can happen very quickly with the right leadership. And that right leadership is not how talented they are or how skilled they are, but really how willing they are to embrace the relationship they have with the people of the company.
Mm. Whereby the again to make or to precipitate the process, it's so easy when there is a focal object like the sandcastle, or what I do a lot with table tennis. I'm a sports coach, and I play and I coach a very large group of youngsters, highly talented but also less talented, and they're all like, in top of their on top of their game. And but it is the game that connects us. I don't have to know their families. So very often I only get to know their families and themselves, what they do at school, for instance, how good they are at school. I only get to know that only after 1.5 years or 2 years. So we pick a third object, and we focalize our shared passion into that, and that's where we grow. And it's up to the person to then say like, hey Olaf, I would like to invite you to my home and meet my parents or meet my family. But it's the safety is that they choose
Yes.
the moment to do that, and not I as a leader. I as a leader just say like, look, I give you a hole in the hole, a gap in the hole that you can jump in, and that you can bring everything that you want to bring to it, and with all your traumas and whatever your background is, I just created opening for you. And if you then later want to tell me, where that all comes from, and what your background is and so on, I will be happy to learn that, and I'm very grateful that you allow me into your world. But it's not a condition to have the deepest of connections together.
Right.
So you can build an immensely deep connection only on one shared, very unimportant thing like table tennis, and a growth path in that hobby for that kid who asked me like, Olaf, you're a champion, what did you do, and how long will it take me to be better than you are? And I tell him, I say like, look, it can take 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, we'll see, but we will keep practicing and so on. So there's this single focus sandcastle, strand beast, this obsessive thing, which is not an obsession, because as you say, we end at the end of the day and tomorrow we start all over again, but it's always the same thing. But then of course the friendship, kind of the scope of the friendship, grows over time, but it doesn't have to be from the beginning.
We're at the break between part one and part two of my conversation with Olaf Hermans. And I want you to know that it will continue in the next episode of the Eddie Network podcast. So I thank you for watching, and come back to see how we finish our conversation. And it is quite good. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.